think this leads perfectly on to my next question, which is about the way attachment styles make us see ourselves. How does attachment shape the way we see ourselves, not just the way we relate to others?
There's less work on this actually, and a lot of it is more anecdotal. But one thing I do know is that people who are anxious know they're anxious. They know they're anxious. They know they ruminate at times. They know that they can smother their partners. They know that they need a lot of reassurance, and they admit it. Avoidant people, not necessarily. There are some avoidant people, especially more dismissive avoidant people, who think they're secure. I'm fine. I'm happy with who I am. I'm happy with what I have. What do you mean I have to have, more emotional support? What do you mean I have to spend more time connecting with my partner? I'm happy where I'm at. And so they don't have as much insight, I don't think, typically, we're talking in general terms here, about who they are in the context of relationships, at least close relationships. Secure people, I think a lot of them do have a lot of insight. One of the things about being secure is that you don't have to think about attachment stuff attachment kinds of things quite as much because you just are reacting to what's in front of you. You aren't worried about losing your partner. You aren't worried about being betrayed. You aren't worried about being smothered or losing your independence. And so secure people this is a little ironic, they are focusing on other life tasks beyond attachment because they're just kind of working it out and they've got it. Things are going well with their partner. They are assuming in an optimistic way that the best is going to happen and they work to kind of achieve those goals. And so sometimes I think secure people, if you ask them that question, they haven't thought a whole lot about it because they haven't had to deal with attachment issues. They haven't had to, deal with the same kinds of struggles that anxious and avoidant people have had to deal with.
Fascinating insight. Is there any correlation between personality traits and attachment styles?
Small, small. So, for example, there's a I'm not sure if all of your listeners know this, but there's a thing called the Big Five personality traits. And there's a debate about there's a five or there's six or seven, but there's consensus that it's close to some number like that. And there are some traits that tend to correlate 0.20, 0.25, which is small, with security. So people who are secure tend to be more agreeable. They're more agreeable in general across relationships and across time. People who are anxious tend to be a little bit more neurotic. Um, Again, these correlations are not big, and they're small enough that the attachment um, measures are considered independent constructs from the personality measures. But there is a little bit of overlap. Sometimes avoidant people are a bit more disagreeable or on these big five measures. So there is a bit of overlap, but it's not large.
That's very surprising to me because as we're talking, as we're discussing, it does feel like there is some, like you talk about anxious and being neurotic. It does feel like there is some correlation. Is there a reason why there isn't any correlation at all? Is it more life experience that brings that into
That's a
play?
really good question. I think it has to do with, I think people in their mind partition close relationship experiences and my experiences in general with people in life, strangers, casual friends, etc. And I think they kind of in their mind it's kind of one way to think about it is that those close relationships are kind of tagged separately from you know what are people like in general. And I think so there's a little bit of overlap because close relationships are also part of the personality portfolio of agreeableness and neuroticism, but they include a lot of other types of relationships. And people may have had very different experiences with their casual friends than, let's say, their parents or their close friends. Or they may have different kind of conceptualizations of strangers based upon the media or based upon, cultural experiences, that are at odds with, how they were treated by their mother or their close friend when they were in high school, things like that. So that's my best guess, but that's a speculation.
Thank you for that. You've talked about a concept called earned security. Could you tell us a bit what that means and also how does it actually happen?
Yeah, it's a concept that comes out more of developmental psychology, and the idea is that there are some people who early in life, especially with their parents, have insecure attachment patterns. So they're either avoidant or they're anxious or they may be disorganized even. Um, but they have these corrective partnerships later in life. It could be with teachers, if they're very, very close to a grade school teacher or a set of teachers, or it could be mentors, or it could be close friends or romantic partners. And these corrective partnerships make them realize you don't have to assume that everyone's going to treat you badly or treat you in a negative way. And so they have learned through these later experiences that they can be secure, and they've earned it because they've had to kind of rework the way they think about who people are. It does not mean that they're necessarily that their insecurity later on is completely gone, because that depends on their memories and how they represent things as an adult when thinking back on their past. But what it does mean is that um, those experiences are still probably there at some level. And this may explain why, when you look at earned secure people compared to people who have never had insecurity, earned secure people, they are better than being in a traditional insecure person, but they're not quite as happy and functional in their relationships later on as someone who's been secure all the way along. So they're kind of in the middle. And this is kind of like, but this is what you see with the outcome of therapy often. If a person's major issue is, I can't trust my spouse, I have been cheated on by my close friends. Um, they basically, if therapy works well, they've learned to let some of that go and learn to trust people a little bit more. And it's been earned, but those experiences are still there.
I think it also speaks to how, by understanding the frameworks of these kind of theories, it can help you on the path to change. I think yeah, that's another question I had for you. How important is it that once you understand these frameworks, like we're talking about, if you understand you're an anxious person, you kind of understand what habits and what traits that mean. How important is that to actually begin in the process of changing?
I think it's critical. I think it's critical to have objective, clear, straightforward self-insight about who you are. Um, Another thing to think about is that a lot of people, I mean, you do compare yourselves to other people, but you're not in the head of other people, and you don't know exactly what they're thinking in a given situation. So this insight can sometimes do is it allows you to see different ways that people think about the meaning of situations. So let's take an anxious person. um, their partner genuinely cares for them. They really do. And they're trying to find a way to express it to the anxious person so they can feel more secure and be less anxious, right? But the anxious person doesn't accept it. If you expose the anxious person to other people who are kind of viewing the same situation and know the partner, they may be able to say, yeah, this is a genuine expression of care and support, and here's why. And once they see other people saying, "Yeah, I mean, I really do think your partner does love you," and when I've had experiences like this, it's been genuine. That can allow people to begin to realize maybe I'm not thinking about this the right way.
Mm. Final question I have, and I want to aim this at my listeners and my viewers. If you could give my generation one understanding from 40 years of research
Yeah.
would actually help them build better relationships and a better inner life, what would it be?
I think actually a kind of a couple. One is choose your partners well. we oftentimes get into relationships, be it with friends or romantic partners, for reasons that may be good in the short term, but not good in the long term. So, and what I mean by that is that a lot of what makes a relationship stable and happy are things that are hard to see when you first meet someone. Like, how compatible am I with this person, really? Um, how truly trustworthy across time is this person? Does this person have the same values that I have? It's hard to see some of those things when you first start dating someone or when you first meet a potential friend. So, but if you can identify people who you're compatible with, who share your values, and who are secure, um, your life is probably going to be easier because those people are going to be able to work with you and find ways to make you and your relationship more stable and happier.